This ESPN podcast is brought to you by Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects. The BS Report. The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, taping this on a Tuesday, and it is a little chilly here in Southern California. We had the college football game, the finals, last night. I guess we call it the finals. Chuck Klosterman, the biggest college football fan at Grantland, he watched it. I think he was excited about it. What was your initial impression?
Oh, it was fun to watch. I also, I got to say, the last time we did one of these, I did not do a very good job of promoting the SEC West in a successful way. I think since that podcast, everything I've thought about college football has been wrong, except I did pick last night's game right. But I'm in a college bowl pool with 18 other guys, and I'm in 19th place.
You were riding the SEC about as much as anyone can ride the SEC in the last podcast.
Yeah, well, I still believe it's the best conference, but then everything that happened afterwards just completely obliterated my insights. But, that's life. You got to roll the bones, see what happens. You watched the game last night, I'm guessing, right? Didn't you?
I watched the last three, which to me is a huge step for college football, the playoff system, because normally I wouldn't have known which game to watch and probably wouldn't have cared. But I really liked having two important January 1st games. It reminded me of what we had when we were growing up, right?
Well, not just that. It was more than two games, because it made the games that TCU and Baylor were in important too, because they had so much more to play for. Yeah. It turns out that the playoff was just good in every context. Not only we have an interesting 3-game playoff. It did not seem to impact the regular season negatively in any way. It was just across the board good, which I would not have said 15 years ago or 10 years ago.
So my theory on what I watched, and I watched those 3 games, was that Alabama probably had the best team, but didn't realize Ohio State was going to give them the challenge. I think Ohio State took them by surprise, and I'm not sure, like, if you played that now and they thought Ohio State was going to be awesome, maybe that game is different. But Ohio State, I guess that's why we have 14 playoffs.
Well, interestingly, the injuries to Ohio State's quarterbacks played to their advantage.
Yes.
They lost Braxton before the season. Barrett plays great all year long. Seems to be arguably the best player in the Big Ten this year. But then when he goes down, they bring Jones in, who's a different kind of player, a much more physical guy. I think that particularly for the Big Ten championship and the playoff against Alabama, they were kind of unsure how to deal with him.
Yeah.
And then when they played Oregon, how do you beat Oregon? Well, you just got to be tougher than them. You just got to go right at them. And that, I kind of feel like he might be the best of the 3 now. I think that Braxton and Baird, they're better. If you want to roll up 55 points against Iowa, they're probably better. But in situations where it's like 3rd and 3, I think you want the guy who no one seems to be able to tackle, and that seems to be this dude. Now I guess he might go pro. That's what I heard today.
Well, I loved it because I've been touting the Ewing theory since 2000, and this was our first ever double Ewing champion. Everyone wrote them off when Braxton Miller got hurt, and then everyone wrote them off when the second guy got hurt. It was a double Ewing theory.
Okay, but tell me this. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I always thought that the Ewing theory, as you have proposed it, was based on the fact that the great player is actually taking away something from the other guys. This really isn't the case here. It's sort of like they had 3 great quarterbacks, all with slightly different skills. Jones being the most sort of disparate. I feel like Braxton and Barrett are very similar in some ways. But it didn't. Swapping these guys out, it's not like it prompted Ezekiel Elliott to necessarily play better, although he played great. It just seems like they happen to have 3 exceptional quarterbacks. And If they all were to stay there next year, that would absolutely be the most fascinating quarterback controversy ever. I can't think of a situation where there were three guys involved like this. I mean, there are many, many, many situations where there are two guys, competing for the job, and you can make an argument for either one. But can you think of a situation, pro or college, where there were three seemingly equal quarterbacks?
I can't even think of a situation with three running backs.
Well, even if there are, that's always to your advantage because you just cycle them through. I mean, this is such a strange thing. Now there the rumors are that Braxton, because I believe I'm right about this, because he would be a graduate student, he can go somewhere and play immediately. So I've heard he was going to Florida State, Texas.
A la Russell Wilson.
Yes, exactly. And now this morning, when I was taking my kid to daycare, I was looking at Twitter, and it seems like all these reports that Jones is considering going to the NFL after only like 3.5 games, which seems crazy because in a sense he's a little bit unpolished. But at this point, pro football and college football as games, the way they are played, seems so different that I don't know if it would be an advantage for him to play another year of college.
Well, it's even the Dante Exum blueprint that's been set. And now I think this Emmanuel Mudiay is going to follow too in the NBA, where you show just enough to have your stock be huge, and then you don't do anything to hurt where that stock is. And his stock is really high right now. It actually makes sense for him to come out. Well,
it does. I mean, he looks like a Dante Culpepper type of player, which is a weird compliment because Culpepper obviously had these awesome years and then some terrible years, and I don't know if that's really you're giving a guy upside or downside by saying that. But the way, especially the style that Ohio State plays, I'm not sure that spending a year doing that is going to put him in a better position to play NFL quarterback than if he was drafted in the second or third round now, played behind somebody for a year or two. That might be just as good. I don't know, but I think it'd be extremely interesting if all three guys came back. I really hope that happens.
So Todd McShay said that Cardale Jones, he would be a day 3 pick, and he compared him to an extremely raw Ben Roethlisberger. He should come back. Unless he thinks he can be like a first rounder or something, which if you're listening to Todd McShay, doesn't think so. I mean, he's so big. It would be interesting. Like early Culpepper was kind of physically imposing, and we'd kind of never seen that before in the NFL. It's somebody who, like defensive linemen, were just bouncing off him. And it does seem like Jones has some of that, but it's hard for me to imagine 3.5 college games and then all of a sudden I'm starting for an NFL team.
It does seem weird. I mean, I remember when Sanchez left early, and at time it seemed like, potentially, I don't know if playing in even that was at USC where they played closer to a pro style set. It seemed as though maybe a year there would help him, but and I think even Pete Carroll was like, "Don't do it." And then he went to the NFL. Initially succeeded, and I think deterred him though. Another year would have been good for him. But like when you watched Ohio State play, they're not doing anything that's like an NFL team. I mean, it's a lot of throwing under read option plays and bringing that wide receiver around the bottom. It doesn't look like anything that he's going to use in the NFL. So I'm not sure what good it would do for him to go and run up a bunch of points against Minnesota and all these schools like Illinois. I don't know what that would really do for him, but we'll see. I mean, I hope. I always want the idea that even Mariota is considering coming back. I don't think he will, but I mean that would be fascinating.
I think Ohio State was a Ewing theory team because when Braxton Miller got hurt, their odds to win the title dropped to 40-1. So it does fit the definition of they lose the quote-unquote marquee guy who they never actually won a title with, and then everyone wrote them off. And then after they lost the second guy, that whole narrative started of, oh, crap, it's too bad Ohio State's even in this Final Four. This is stupid. They have no chance. That whole thing started. So there was some real Ewing theory kind of vibes. I mean, I don't really know anything about college football, and I just assumed Alabama was going to destroy Ohio State. I think the line was Alabama by 9.
Oh, I mean, I was shocked. I mean, of the two games on January 1st, the two playoff games, I got them both wrong. I thought Florida State probably would win that game, even though I felt Oregon had more talent. And I thought Alabama would just roll over Ohio State, and I was wrong on both. And then last night, I still felt Oregon was the better team, but for some reason, it seemed as though kind of the mythical idea of momentum was just on Ohio State's side.
Yeah. Well, they just seemed more physical. I actually thought the defining play of that game was when the defensive, the front four guy on the Ohio State's defense, when he sacked Mariota and kind of followed through on the play. It probably should have been a penalty, but there was a little FU in it and drove him into the ground. And then the Oregon guys the offensive lineman got mad, and they ended up, I think one of them got a penalty. But to me, that was like the defining play of the game. I thought Ohio State just seemed more physical.
Yeah, it is odd. You know, Oregon has been very good now for a decade, but as you go through them year by year, pretty rare to find where they won the biggest game they played that year. It does still, I mean, I think if you're a real football purist, you probably like what happens with Oregon. Because it seems as though if they're a little better than their opponent, they just blow their doors off. But when it gets really equal, their philosophy, for whatever reason, kind of crumbles. If you can stop them on first down, that changes everything. They played LSU in the first game of the year a couple years ago, and it seemed as though if you could stop them on first down, that was the whole thing.
Yeah, and watching them, it reminded me a little bit of the Peyton Manning Colts in the early 2000s, where they had this pinball offense basically, but then they would play the Pats, and the Pats would just kind of throw them around and beat them up. And I thought that's what happened last night. The Urban Meyer Jim Harbaugh thing now becomes the most fun college football rivalry, right?
Yeah, I mean, particularly if he makes Michigan good fast, and I think that he probably will. I mean, this was just a really good end of the season for the Big Ten in general.
Yeah,
because in
it's
November,
back, baby.
In November, it seemed like you would be like, well, boy, can we even view the Big Ten as good as the ACC? It just seemed like they were, they were the weakest of the Power Five conferences. And not only do they win the title, but they have the most intriguing coach coming in. The guy from Oregon State's now going to Nebraska. I think that he's going to have some success there. It's like Minnesota's getting better. It's like all these weird things are happening at once. And it will be the most, although this sort of happened with the Pac-12 a couple years ago, where they got all these great coaches in, and everyone got excited, and then nothing really changed. And
then you have the possible Penn State post-paternal rejuvenations lingering.
Yeah.
That could be fun. I'm excited for Meyer versus Harbaugh, and I feel like everybody's got to take sides in that one, which happens sometimes in college sports where there's some rivalry, and even though you don't care about either team, you still feel like fundamentally you have to pick a side. Like I always felt like I've had to pick a side in UNC versus Duke. I don't care about either team, but I feel like I need to take a side, and I've always sided with Carolina.
That's definitely the more populist take on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean populist? That felt insulting.
Well, I just like you when you is that insulting?
Well, no, I don't know. I wanted.
Well, I mean, I guess the opposite would be elitist. Well, like is either one of those terms positive? I guess they're both kind of pejorative, but I mean, it's just that the number of people who root for Duke is much, much, much smaller than the number of people who root for North Carolina, even though it feels equal when they play.
You know, we're doing a 30 for 30 called I Hate Christian Laettner.
I saw that.
About the whole Laettner era, which I think people are going to really dig, which is coming March Madness. But it was really three guys that created the Duke thing. I don't even think you could totally blame Coach K. But it was Laettner, it was Hurley, and Danny Ferry. And that's the Trioka of people that just turned everyone against Duke. And then there was no going back after the Laettner-Hurley combo. That was it.
Yeah, I think that there were guys who didn't like Ferry, but at that time they seemed like they were on the cusp of dominance. You know, they got beat by Louisville the year Ellison was there. I think that was the farthest they went with Ferry. And they still seem definitely a second-tier team compared to North Carolina. And then after Leitner was there, that wasn't the case anymore.
I love that Louisville, that was a great era of college basketball where like Purvis Ellison goes to Louisville and gets braces and it's not fishy at all. I always thought that was funny. Hey, look at Purvis Ellison's braces, but I'm sure nobody paid for them.
I think it's starting to look now that was the best era of college basketball.
Oh, no question. Well,
I mean, I think that period, that decade ended up being, I didn't realize it at the time, but it seems clear now that was the best period for college basketball.
Well, you and I talk about this sometimes, and I don't want to rehash the conversation, but like Anthony Davis would be a senior at Kentucky right now.
He would be a very
when you think of it that
player.
way, it's and you know basketball evolves and guys peak a little bit younger, and it's stupid to think, you know, whoa, what would happen if this guy was in there and this guy's in there? But it just shows how much has changed in 30 years because like Ewing stayed all 4 years in Georgetown. And arguably would have been one of the best 5 players in basketball if he had, you know, played the last 2 years in the NBA of his Georgetown experience.
Although also when those guys stayed, it did sort of suppress their talent a bit. I mean, like Anthony Davis would not be the player he is now. I
agree.
Kentucky. No.
Yeah, I agree. I think it hurt Ewing. I think Ewing should have come out probably after his sophomore year. Like he was just so athletic and you know, and every game he played, everybody was just jumping on him. You know, it was four people coming down and closing on him. And it just, you're not going to get better offensively when that's happening.
Well, the guy who's hurt the most though was Sampson.
No
he
question.
Should have won.
He also had only so many games in his knees too. Who do you like? Like if you had to pick a side, Kentucky versus Louisville basketball, who do you pick in that? Do you care?
Traditionally, I root for Louisville in that relationship.
Yeah. What about UCLA versus USC?
Football or basketball?
Both.
I guess actually UCLA for both.
Interesting. That's a better rivalry than I think anyone outside of California knows. It's a really good one. It's really like a genuine hatred.
70s. Like in the early 70s for football, that was a big deal. But it kind of faded as UCLA because it's been a long time since. Like UCLA looked like they were going to be good this year, and they were kind of paper again. I mean, I don't know. It seems as though that they can't get it together.
Hey, let's talk about Whiplash.
Okay, let's talk about it.
You told me to see this 6-7 weeks ago, and you were like, I can't wait for you to see this movie. I would really want to see what you think. And I saw it. I thought it was excellent. I thought it was probably my second favorite. I still like Birdman the most, but I think Whiplash might be second.
Well, I just think Whiplash is fascinating because it forwards an idea that you just do not see in the popular culture anymore, which is that sort of like the idea that inhumane, like unacceptable treatment of people sometimes potentially does work. You know, it's like that might be one way to generate genius because we're kind of at this point now where it's not only do we not accept that as a way, you know, and I mean, I wouldn't want my kid or anything to be treated that way. Like you don't want that to happen, but we almost are trying to convince ourselves culturally that it doesn't even work if you do it. Like it's not only is it wrong to do, but it would completely fail. And like this movie basically says that's not true, and that part of the reason that America's a different place now than it was 20 years ago or 40 years ago or whatever is because this idea has disappeared.
Yeah, and then the other idea that's emerged, which you haven't fully formed an opinion on yet because your kids aren't old enough, is the whole soccer culture, which is just terrible. And I don't mean soccer's terrible. I just mean like the youth soccer and don't keep score. Everybody gets to play. There's no winners and losers out here. There's no goalies. And it's just this mentality. I'm seeing it with my daughter's school now. Like they had all these kids try out for volleyball, and they ended up splitting it into two teams. And instead of having an A team and a B team, which you'd think they would have in the fourth grade it's just these two evenly split teams and everybody gets to play the same minutes. And I don't know if that's a good thing.
Well, I
like
think that it doesn't bother me as long as they don't sort of position this as sport. If they position it as activity, that's fine. I mean, like a little 6-year-old kid, a 7-year-old kid playing soccer. I mean, I guess if it's fine if it's just sort of running around and essentially playing tag with a ball, and that's cool. But like that's a separate thing than what sports are. Like that's an activity, and and that's like an aerobic activity. So but I certainly that there's an element of that sort of in the thinking behind Whiplash. I think that it's just like I'm not even. I know, and I kind of explain it that way. Like I'm promoting the theme of this movie, and I don't know if I necessarily promote it. I just think that it is interesting to just sort of wonder if the more human our society has come, like obviously there's a downside to everything. So what will we lose from sort of humanizing the way we treat people in sort of the teacher-pupil relationship?
Right. And the fundamental, I don't want to give away the entire movie, but the fundamental conflict of the movie is the teacher believes that this is a way to push somebody to true greatness. But then the counter to that is, well, what if you're also pushing somebody away from true greatness? And how do you know what's the best? And maybe it's the best thing for each person. But, you think about like if I joined the military, one of the ways they train prospects, like let's say I wanted to go into the Navy SEALs when I was 18. You go in there, this is kind of like the Whiplash way is kind of the way they weed out the people that can't handle it, right? And that hasn't changed at all.
Well, and there the stakes are different. I mean,
much different.
If a person can literally be killed by being unprepared, is it in any way to his benefit sort of hide that kind of intensity from him, even if it's dehumanizing? I don't know. These are actually questions I hate thinking about in a way. I mean, I guess I like thinking about them, but I don't like thinking about what they actually mean.
Right. Well, my point is that the military has never changed how they train people, but yet we've changed how we train, say, athletes, and you don't have think about like Woody Hayes. Like Woody Hayes was such a tough coach that his career ended because I forget what bowl game it was. The opposing player had a tackle.
The Gator Bowl. He punched a kid from Clemson.
He punched a kid from the other team. That's how crazy he was. How high wired he was. Those coaches are kind of just out.
Yeah,
those coaches anymore.
I think it's. I'm gonna get this wrong. Coached at K-State for a while. The basketball coach Martin is his last name. He's a crew cut. I'm not sure where he's at now. He's no longer at Kansas State. But he seemed to be the closest version of that was still kind of in the modern age. But it is that is kind of gone. I mean, I just and I mean, I don't know. It seems like a weird thing to be nostalgic for in a way, like to miss the idea of a Woody Hayes type person in the world. But I don't know. Something tells me that that kind of personality connects us to a reality that we're just trying to pretend does not exist and really has not changed.
Well, think about.
I mean, I would think of the NFL, for example. I was just thinking about.
I was going to say that.
It looks like it. For all the attempts to sort of change football, and because of can we make this game less violent in a way? Can we make it so that it doesn't seem like this sort of concussion-oriented death trap or whatever? But like when it looks to me like the Super Bowl is going to be Seattle and New England, and outside of quarterbacks, I think there's a very limited number of players who can really sort of dominate a game by themselves. And I feel like Marshawn Lynch and Gronkowski are two of the only ones. And when you get right down to it, it's not really skill-based. It's purely physical-based. Yeah. I mean, they're skilled guys. But really, when we get down to the end here, it is simply who cannot be tackled. And those are two guys who, at times, cannot be tackled.
Well, and then you have the three Seattle D-backs who are all terrific. There's a physicality with them that I think, worries me as a Patriot fan, because I think, especially Chancellor is going to go into that Super Bowl if it happens. I don't want to jinx it, but they're going to go into that game thinking like, we got to hit the hell out of Gronkowski. So that's actually going to feel like an old school football. They're going to be like, every time Edelman goes over the middle, we're killing him. And that's going to be the mentality they have. So it does have a little bit old school. I thought you were going the direction of the NFL is probably the closest we have to those old school dipping into the Whiplash type of level of coaches. And I think it does seem like reading the Jim Harbaugh stories, everybody talks about, well, he wears you out. He said 3 years and you're done. And it does seem like there's a little element of that with him where he's just pushing guys and exploding and getting mad and freaking out. And there's some sort of a shelf life, especially with guys who are getting paid, a lot of money to play football. And at some point they just start tuning those people out.
Yeah, you know, it's like how much emotional manipulation will you accept? It seems as though many players will accept it for 1 or 2 years in all sports.
Yeah.
It seems like a guy can come in, a Bill Musselman type character can come in and just get in guys' minds and sort of push their feelings around, sort of push the way they think around, and that will work. And then it just always just eventually fades. I guess maybe what happens is at some point you realize that it's really the illusion of threat. That what these guys are sort of suggesting, they really can't even come through on because their job is on the line too. They can't stop playing the best players regardless of how they respond to their sort of, kind of a emotional tactic.
Tibbs is like that. Tibbs is like that in Chicago. Everybody's been saying for the last 24 months that, he's worn those guys down. He's just every game. He plays like it's game 7. Those guys. And yet when you watch them, they've had moments this year where they looked as good as anybody, and that's just how he does it. To him, every game matters equally, and he's always trying to win, and he's going to leave his guys out, and he does the anti-Popovich of he's not going to be like, hey, Noah, just take tonight off. We've had 4 and 5 nights. I want to, it's a marathon, not a sprint. He goes the other way. Popovich, I think, is kind of blends all the worlds. Like he's the most player friendly coach, but he's also the guy that if he yelled at you, your feelings would be hurt the most.
Well, and he, for the most part, has a team that comes from different cultures. I think maybe cultures that are still, I don't know. I thought, it's always different to be yelled at by somebody from a different country. If you've ever had this experience, it's one thing to be yelled at from a guy who speaks your language and sounds like you, but when somebody from a different country yells at you, it feels different. Yeah.
Right. I wonder, especially like the NBA coach. Like I'm watching now with Doc Rivers. Who makes a ton of money and who's won a ring, so he carries a certain amount of respect. He's in control of the players in the Clippers, and yet can't get them to really play hard every game. And there's just games like that I've gone to where it doesn't seem like they like each other and they're not really invested, and he doesn't totally know what to do. And it makes me think like coaching professional athletes who make a lot of money has to be up there on the toughest jobs. I think we actually take it for granted. Like think about the situation David Blatt got put in. He's got to deal with LeBron coming home. He's got to figure out how to handle the most famous basketball player and the best basketball player of the last 20 years. He's got Kevin Love who's coming in, who has all these strengths and weaknesses that are really dramatic one way or the other, who has never been kind of a supporting guy in his life. He's got Kyrie Irving, who's this point guard who's really just selfish. Like he just goes for his own offense. He doesn't care about setting up anyone else. So you got to deal with him. Then you got Deion Waiters, who's a maniac, who thinks he's probably the best guy in the team. He's a rational confidence guy. You have no rim protection. You have these incredibly high expectations, and you've never coached before. What is a tougher job than that?
Well, and I think that you ignored the toughest part yet. I mean, imagine if you were trying to run Grantland, and you were making $75,000 a year. Sean Fennessy is making $600,000 a year, and you know that if things crater, Disney will fire you.
Right.
I mean, how do you do that?
That's true.
How many other jobs does the boss make so much less than the employee?
Right.
And has no
so
leverage.
Much less.
Yeah.
And then you have, so he's in there, and it's the 24/7 NBA coverage era. I'm not defending Blatt, by the way. I don't think he's done a good job, but I also think he was put in an impossible job. But it's the Twitter era. It's the overreact after every loss era. It's the what's wrong with the Cavs after they lose 2 games era. Everyone's just the microscope is so large. And to just go through that day after day after day, and then a month in, LeBron's agent, Rich Paul, hires Mark Jackson as a client. So now you got to worry about that. You have Tyronn Lue, who's the highest paid assistant coach in the league. He's your right-hand man, but you don't really have a relationship with him, but you know he's friendly with the guys. And now people are putting YouTube clips of the players watching Ty Lue and ignoring you. And that's on YouTube and Reddit and all these places. That's weird. You know, I just think I wouldn't want to be an NBA coach. I think
it is. But, you know, also
oh
just one thing I'll say about this is, if you go back and look at the coverage of the first 2 months of the Heat when LeBron went there,
right,
there was a lot
Same
of questions then too. Like I think that especially because they're in the East, they're pretty safe.
Here's the difference, though. But here's the difference. That Miami team, Spoelstra had Riley, and he also had a team that made sense. The only question with that Miami team was, can LeBron and Wade figure out who's the alpha dog? And it took them until the second season until that part fell into place. But athletically, they were great. Defensively, that team was really good. You know, they were up 2-1 in the finals. They started out the first 17 games. I think they're 9-8. And after that, they took off. This Cavs thing, the teams never made sense. They've never really played well for more than 2 or 3 games, and it just seems fundamentally flawed. And it's a classic case of putting your team together before the season starts, which a lot of teams try to do, where they're just like, we got to get our team ready. And then sometimes you don't have to do that. You know, you can kind of see what you have and make a trade here and keep going and see what you have. It's almost like the Red Sox are doing this now, weirdly, with their starting rotation. They don't have a number one starter. And my dad and I are like, who's our number one starter? We're freaking out. But at the same time, like, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. Play 2 months without a number one starter, then go trade for one. You know, everyone tries to finish their team before the season. What
condition do you think the Cavs would be in if they had not made the move? They had Wiggins and Bennett there with LeBron.
Well, we were talking about doing something about this for the Grantland basketball show about what would the Cavs look like if they had literally done nothing after they signed LeBron. Right now they'd have, one of the dumbest things they did was they signed Varejao to an extension for reasons that remain unclear. He would have been a really big, valuable, expiring contract. Wiggins, I see it both ways. Like, I wrote a piece about I didn't think they should have traded him. I thought they should have kept him for a couple months and see what they had. But at the same time, like, they were able to get Kevin Love for him, who's a top 10 player, and you always take the guaranteed sure thing over the hypothetical guy. So I could see their point. But man, if you look back and it's like, Wiggins is really coming on now. I don't know. You probably haven't seen, but like the last 2 weeks,
no,
he's starting to figure it out.
He's on my fantasy team, so I've been following him real closely.
He's starting to figure it out. Like the light bulb went off.
And I don't you feel like that if you keep Wiggins, you put him with LeBron, you're really setting up your franchise for 10 or 12 years. You're essentially putting him in a position where he can be sort of like the second guy, LeBron, and then eventually become the man. That's what I was in favor of, but then no one else seemed to feel that way. I mean, everybody seemed like exactly what you said, that if you have a chance to get Love, you got to do it. Even though, what is the most success he's ever had anywhere?
Well, so they also gave up 3 first-round picks because they gave up one in the Love trade, and then 2 for Mozgov, which was the funniest trade in about 4 years. Mozgov, that was ridiculous. That was an all-time panic trade.
Oh, but, I think that they're panicking in general. They feel like we got to do this now. That they're just suddenly realizing that they are not set for the future, and maybe they're not even so secure about how long LeBron is going to be there.
Well, everybody thinks Love's going to leave. I mean, that's the under-the-radar basketball story right now. Is everybody in the league is talking about where's Love going to go? Like, he seems miserable. It seems like LeBron hates playing with him. Him and Kyrie have not clicked. And we're heading toward a world where if Love leaves, if he just says, screw this, I'm out of here, and goes signs with the Lakers, or the Knicks or wherever the hell he goes. And then now it's just LeBron and Kyrie and Mozgov and no first round picks and Tristan Thompson, who everyone thinks is going to get overpaid because he has the same agent as LeBron. And, you know, LeBron would weirdly be in a very similar situation to the one that he left in 2010, where they were kind of stuck with this roster that they couldn't fix. But this time it was all his fault, because we all know LeBron's greenlighting these moves. He doesn't come back unless he knows they're getting Kevin Love. You know, I think that everyone thinks that was part of the whole thing. So the lesson is, don't let your players pick your players.
Hey, I wanted to ask you a little bit about a story I feel not got much attention. You've been following this Rob Conrad story?
Yes. It's one of those where my detector went off immediately. It just seems like there's more to the story.
Oh, really? So you're okay? That wasn't going to be my angle. I didn't have a conspiracy on this.
No, I always gravitate toward conspiracy.
Oh, sure. I would love to hear whatever conspiracies about this you have. Just for people who don't know, this is a guy who he was a fullback for the Dolphins. The reason I thought you might know is I think he's from Boston. So I thought maybe you'd follow for that reason. But he's out fishing. He's this big fisherman. Falls off his boat and swims 16 hours to shore. So I was curious, how long could you swim to live? I'm just wondering, if you...
That's the chuckiest Chuck question in a while.
Well, it's like because he's thinking about his wife, he's thinking about his kids. I imagine you in the same position. You've got a lot to live for. You've got a lot of responsibilities. You love your life. How long could you swim to live?
Well, I think in that situation, sometimes it's not up to what you want mentally and how bad you want it. If your body shuts down, it's over.
Yes.
Like if you get hypothermia, it doesn't matter how much you want to live. Like your body's shutting down, and all of a sudden you start seeing stars, and then you're half conscious, and then all of a sudden you're done. So I don't even know. I mean, I think it would be the first few hours. It would be the will of the whole thing, but then after that, you have to get lucky. He must have been in good shape, I'm guessing. I thought that was the weirdest story. That story was so weird. I was almost like, all right, so what's the other shoe that's going to drop with this? This guy falls off his fishing boat, which was on automatic pilot, and swims 16 hours back to shore. What the hell is going on?
Well, so
he swam 9 miles.
I am okay. Now I'm really curious. Okay, what are the possible conspiracies? First of all, what you think this was some attempt to what?
I don't know. I just thought it was I've never heard of a story like that. I just thought.
You've heard of stories. People have been lost and had to walk a long ways or something. That guy gets his arm caught underneath a rock, cuts off his arm with a knife. That dude, these things happen. I mean, I always like these stories because I always wonder, how would I behave in this scenario? And I really fear that, not well. That in fact, I kind of fear I might give up. I worry about how intense my will to live is, and of course, everybody wants it to be intense, but
right. Well, there was a real sports story I remember from a few months ago about a bunch of college football buddies who went on a boat trip, and they were all stuck in the water, and one of them ended up going down, and that it was a hypothermia thing. I think you want to live for as long as your brain's working. But then you kind of run out of choices. But what was the Franco movie where he cut off his arm?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
That's another one, right? Where you're sitting there like, all right, what would I do? I almost feel like that's a better option, because that one is now your choice. Are you willing to cut off your arm to live? Would you do that? Would you go through the pain of cutting off your arm to live?
Do you think?
Would you just...
What? Well, maybe this is an interesting related question. What would you feel more comfortable doing to live? Cutting off your arm with a pocket knife or swimming 16 hours? For me, it's very easy. I can't swim. I would die, so I would cut off anything. I would have no choice. But
I think people underestimate how hard it would be to swim for that long if you hadn't really been doing that much swimming.
Who's underestimating it?
Well, I'd have a better chance. I'd have a better chance with the pocket knife because I have contacts on. So me in contact lenses trying to swim for 16 hours, I would say I'm going to be at the bottom.
Don't you have a disposable?
No, but I mean, I'm in the water. Like the water's hitting my eyes. Like at some point.
Yeah, I know, but I would think at one point. So you don't feel. I mean, my eyesight is terrible, but you feel that you would need your contacts to see. You're swimming basically in one direction toward the light.
I'm blind. I wouldn't even be able to see the light. I'd be done. I'd be out. This is why I don't go fishing.
He also said that he showed up wherever he landed, like went to a house and rang the doorbell at 4:30. But that was an interesting conversation.
Hey, can I borrow a towel? My wife likes to do this with movies. My wife likes any movie where she can put herself in the situation of somebody who's in danger. Like we watched No Good Deed this weekend, which is a terrible movie. It's a pay-per-view movie, but it's strangely watchable because Stringer Bell's in it, and I can't remember how you pronounce her first name, but Henson, who's now on the Empire show. But it's basically this crazy serial killer. Basically, gets out, he escapes, crashes his car as he's going to somebody's house, and rings her doorbell, and then she just lets him in to make a phone call. And it's one of those, as Wesley Morris calls it, a blank from hell movie. It's like The Nanny from hell. The serial killer shows up at your door from hell, and so on. And my wife loves those movies, and okay, I'm not one of those put myself in the situation.
Well, here's what I can say: if this is what you and your wife like to do, like to watch movies and then kind of put yourself into the film,
no,
I have a recommendation. For
good. Okay.
Watch the movie Force Majeure. I think I might be pronouncing it right. It's Force MAJEURE. I'm pretty sure it's a Swedish movie, but it's about a couple and their son and their daughter who go on a skiing trip, and something interesting happens. And I think I would enjoy hearing your sort of familial reaction to this.
Well, my wife likes the Naomi Watts tsunami movie, where the family gets split up. That's like her kind of movie. She's like, what would I do? If you weren't there and the kids went another way, like how would I, she likes
this is slightly different because it involves, well, it depends how you look at it. You can say it involves a choice on the behalf of the husband, or it proves that and there are certain issues we have no choice and we just react.
Yeah, it's role playing when your choices have been taken away from you, I guess. She's always like, here's what I do. We rented that at like 11 o'clock, one of those last two nights of the weekend, just because we've gotten all these. I've seen almost every 2014 movie now. We get all the screeners, and it's such a serious year of movies. These movies are just getting weightier and weightier and weightier, and like, I have no idea why they made the Jolie movie. Unbreakable or Unbroken, whatever the hell it's called. It's about this guy who made the Olympics and didn't even like win a medal.
Well, I mean that was an extremely popular book.
No, I know. I totally get. It was a great book. People loved it. But I'm just telling you what happens in the movie. He's an Olympian. Goes to war. It crashes. They're in the water with sharks for a half hour. Then he goes in a camp. He gets tortured for another hour, and then he gets out, and the movie ends. It's like, what the hell just happened? I just watched somebody suffer for 2 hours. What was fun about this? I don't get those movies. Maybe I'm too old.
Did you see Citizen 4?
No.
Citizen 4 is the documentary about Edward Snowden. That's worth seeing.
You like that one?
I guarantee you. Well, the thing about it is I had I still have mixed feelings about the whole idea of privacy and all these things, but I had very mixed feelings about Snowden. But seeing this documentary, I would say my mixed feelings are no longer mixed. It's pretty hard to watch this movie and not feel like, at the very least, this person's motives are good, and that he is not crazy, and that he is not attempting to sort of somehow benefit from doing this. It's like his motives are pretty good, and it even though a lot of the movie are just like people sitting in a hotel room looking at a laptop, it's surprisingly compelling. Did you see Inherent Vice? I was curious what you thought of that.
That's one of the last ones I need to see because I think we're doing a Grantland Oscar show.
Are you all going to wear tuxedos?
Wesley and Chris Connolly.
You should all wear tuxedos. That seems like a very Grantland, Oscar move to make. Yeah.
I have a couple. I have the P.T. Anderson movies. It's really tough for me to get past like how the P.T. Anderson and the Wes Anderson, the fans of those movies.
So they treat them differently. That's true. They treat them because they're sort of different filmmakers.
But the benefit of the doubt they get from people who love those directors and think they're geniuses, which they probably are. In P.T. Anderson's case, definitely. I feel like they could release anything and those people would defend the movie. Well, I really want to know what P.T. Anderson movie could he make that the P.T. Anderson fans, and I'm looking at you, Sean Fantasy, who's just gotten 2 shout-outs in the same podcast somehow. But what P.T. Anderson movie could he make? P.T. Anderson could have made No Good Deeds, whatever that Stringer Bell movie is. And I feel like the P.T. Anderson, he's satirizing the whole Blank from Hell culture.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, once you make enough really great pieces of art, then any art you make becomes meaningful. It doesn't matter how good it is. I mean, like at this point, you can go through and watch any Woody Allen movie. And some of the Woody Allen movies over the last 15, 20 years have been horrible if you see them in a vacuum. But because he made them, then basically it's like, well, here's a way for me to access what I think is what drives him, or his view of the world, or why would he choose to make this of all the things he could make? Why that So like it kind of makes uninteresting things captivating. I mean, Wes Anderson's a little different because I feel like people who are into Wes Anderson are really into that aesthetic, and they just want to see that aesthetic in movies, and he does it the best.
Good luck to all of them. Well, did you like The Master?
Well, The Master, first of all, yes, but I need to qualify that by saying that after There Will Be Blood, which was probably the most I was affected by a film in a theater in a long time, that now when I see a P.T. Anderson movie, and he's the only director like this, I actually go in with the expectation that this might be the best movie I've ever seen. So when I went to The Master, and I was also, I'm really, as I'm sure we've talked about, I'm really interested in the kind of the culture of Scientology, and I thought, well, boy, this is going to be something. This is going to be a real. This is going to illustrate something about Scientology I'd never before considered, or whatever. And it really wasn't a big part of the film. And as a result, I was a little disappointed. Then I saw The Master again on TV. And I thought, well, this is a really good movie. But it's the same way with Inherent Vice. I mean, I went into this film thinking that if this isn't the best movie I saw this year, it's a letdown, which is kind of an unfair sort of way to look at a guy, but that's how I am.
He's like when you go to see LeBron James once a year. Well, maybe not anymore. I don't know if that's a different point of his career now, but where you just think this guy's the GOAT, and I'm going to see him score 45 points and 50.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be like if I went to a track meet that Usain Bolt was running, and he won, but he ran like a 9.98. Like, I would be pretty disappointed.
Well, the other thing, and this happened with Woody Allen too, when a director gets a point where they can work with any actor they want. So now they're just getting the cream of the crop of talented actors. And those people can often save something that maybe wasn't that good.
Although typically these guys, when they get to that point, it's like, P.T. Anderson kind of keeps the same stable. Scorsese usually uses DiCaprio now. I mean, they sort of kind of, I think, go into these projects with an idea of who will be the star, knowing that they can potentially get that star. And that might make it slightly easier to be good.
Yeah. So anyway, to answer your question, I've not seen Inherent Vice yet because I need to be in the emotional right frame of mind for it because my expectations are going to be high. But I thought The Master was incoherent, and I know everybody makes their case the other way, and it really meant this, and it's like it's a freaking movie. Nobody is that good. It reminds me of when The Sopranos' final scene, when people broke down frame by frame what everything in the final scene meant. It's like, David Chase isn't that good. I'm sorry. No human being is that good that they put that much thought into every single aspect of this diner scene. It's like, stop it. It's ridiculous.
Okay, with two questions. First, would you say, give me an example of a movie you have liked that you would argue did not have narrative coherence? Like, is it, I mean, because it might be, and this is a totally reasonable argument to make, but like some people just don't like a movie that involves a great deal kind of unclarity or cognitive distance or whatever. Is there a movie you like that you don't understand what happens in it?
Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay.
I don't know what the happened in that movie, but I really liked it. And it's weird.
That movie has aged well, actually.
It's really aged well, and the
really
Cruise Kidman stuff is fascinating. And I don't know,
argument they have early in that movie.
Oh, it's great. It's so weird, and I feel like Kubrick's trying to tell me something much bigger than what the movie's about, but I can't figure out what it is because I'm not smart enough.
So I think he was. My theory, which I'm not the only person who has this, is that something disturbed him about Cruise and Kidman's marriage. He decided to break them up.
That's interesting.
Here's the second question I wanted to ask.
Hold on, back on Eyes Wide Shut for a second. Cruise basically took almost 2 years out of his career in his prime to film that movie because he wanted to work out with Kubrick. I think this is like one of the most interesting things Cruise ever did because he was at his peak. He had just done Jerry Maguire. He had now had a 15-year career of just killing it. He was a commercial actor. He'd been nominated for an Oscar. He'd been in a bunch of iconic from a pop culture standpoint movies. And then now comes off the most likable movie he's ever made where everybody's like, Tom Cruise is a great actor. He still has it. And then he disappears for 2 years. Very reminiscent of almost like Jordan going to play baseball. Like Cruise, like, you know what? I'm flipping the switch here. I'm going to go make Eyes Wide Shut, and I'm going to follow that with Magnolia. Well, right? It's like he could have just kept ripping off blockbusters.
But why would
and then I think he realized, like, ooh, I screwed that up. I'm going to start doing the Mission Impossible series. Back to the commercial Tom Cruise.
I mean, I think that that he made the right call on every level.
Me too.
I mean, yes, he could have kept making movies that would have been commercially successful, and that he would have been the kind of actor that a lot of that a certain kind of person would like until they become maybe more serious about film or whatever. But he felt, I'm becoming a person who's more serious about film, and arguably certainly the greatest American director of the 20th century wants me. Unless you go like Count Ford or something, but it's like he's like, this guy wants to use me in this movie, and Kubrick was obviously, I mean, like a lot of the stuff in there is also Kubrick really examining the perception or the reality that Tom Cruise is gay, and he's like putting that in the movie, and Cruise is letting him.
So like, you buy that theory?
Oh well, I mean, there's a couple scenes that are just, I mean, like when Tom Cruise goes to that hotel to get it, like every person in the movie seems like they're coming on to Tom Cruise. Watch the movie again sometime. Every person he interacts with is flirting with him, and this is sort of I think Kubrick commenting on how he believes Cruise perceives himself and how he perceives reality. I think that movie is in some ways, if you want to have an issue with it, it's almost, you could argue, unethical of Kubrick to have done this. But I mean, like with The Shining, he basically, tried to break an actress's mind. It's like he's willing to do that. He was willing to do that to sort of do these mental games with the cast.
Well, Paul Thomas Anderson did that. We revealed in the oral history Boogie Nights scene, the oral history of Boogie Nights, the scene with the firecrackers and the drug deal gone wrong. And he just basically, like, they're throwing firecrackers for 2 days trying to drive the actors crazy. And then he gets the famous shot of Wahlberg just zoning out with that psycho look on his face. And that was the result of 2 days of tormenting it kind of goes back to our Whiplash thing of you got to torment people to get their best performance. In that case, it happened.
The second question I wanted to ask you, which is not totally related, but did you watch, and maybe you already talked about this on a podcast and I missed it, did you watch The Affair?
I did. I have discussed this on a podcast.
Did you discuss with Andy or something? Because I think Andy did not so much like it, and you did. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, Andy was watching it incorrectly.
Yeah. I started watching it in the middle, and I really liked it. However, something happened with that show that now I'm kind of troubled by. Here's what I thought. Tell me, and I'd be interested in your response to this. Like when I started watching, here's what I thought it was. I thought it was two people basically describing the exact same event. And we were supposed to sort of understand how memory is different and how conversations are different. But that the event was the same, that everything that happened to one character also happened to the other character. But as it moved along, that seemed to not be the case. It almost seemed like they were experiencing two totally different realities. And that made me like it slightly less.
In the last episode, that's her version of whatever happened and his version of whatever happened was just too different.
Yeah.
I like the concept of people like, I remember it happening this way, and then people remembering things in their own favor, which I think is what that was about. The last episode was too different.
To their own self-criticism. Like they remember things about themselves, you know, and there was supposed to be all these interesting details that I like. Apparently in this, like his memories, like she wears different bras. There were like supposed to be all these little things kind of built in about how we would remember an event. So I thought this is kind of poorly written at times, but I thought the concept is great. But now I don't know how I feel about it anymore.
Well, here would be my take on that. I think the goal was the takes are different, but they're different because this is what they're telling the police person. So it's their story. So it's not like whatever their reality was, but it's also like, here's the story they're actually telling the police person crossed with the version that favors them was how I interpreted it. So the fact that that last episode was so strange and so out of whack from her version versus his version means now that somebody's lying, or it's a terribly written show. That's an interesting thing. You think so? You're saying that over time it will unspool that one of these stories is real. Yeah. Do you really think Stanley Kubrick was like, I want to destroy Tom Cruise mentally? That's the best thing you've said to me in like 2 years. It totally changes, but now I have to watch that movie again.
Yeah, I think that he was wanted to work with Tom Cruise for the work he had seen in Cruise's other films, and upon meeting him, concluded that this person is fucking crazy. That everything about him is artifice, and that there is no real person here, and he's in this sham marriage with this person who I think he probably thought was pretty charming, and he was like, they shouldn't be together, and I don't even know if this guy is straight. I think he's using, but it's not like Nicole Kidman's his beard. It's like she's unknowingly trapped in this incredibly kind of tragic relationship, and he essentially used the movie to destroy their marriage and succeeded. I mean, now, do I have any proof of this? I have no proof of this. But
when you make a movie that is that weird and that weirdly affecting, you're going to have weird theories come out of it. I thought it was Mark Maron did a podcast with Paul Thomas Anderson. That's like 2 hours long. And in that podcast, at some point, he starts talking about Magnolia, and he's talking about basically, it was definitely too long. I didn't know how to edit it myself at that point. I thought that was a really interesting concession for him to make, that he looks back at that movie now and he has like real regrets about how he handled it and how he edited it versus what actually happened. What I'm guessing, I don't know if he said this, I haven't listened to this podcast, but it sounds pretty interesting. People have told me it's good. But he maybe added one more narrative arc than necessary. Maybe he could have removed the John C. Reilly stuff. But once you have these people in the movie and they're so good, I mean, everybody's good in that movie, that you would never think about editing them out of the film. You just got to kind of have it there. That's something that happens to directors, I think, all the time, where they have some actor they really like or some part they really like, and it doesn't make sense in the movie, but they feel bad about cutting it out. Well, that's why all these action movies, the CGI action movies, are so terrible now, because like they make a Transformers movie or whatever, and they put all this money into those effects,
And once they've paid for those effects and made the investment in them, they're not cutting any of that. So all of a sudden they have to somehow create exposition to explain all of these, hyper expensive special effects. And it takes another 80 minutes or 90 minutes of movie, and you get these 3-hour and 5-minute movies. It's like they don't dare cut out anything they paid for. It's just kind of the same thing, but instead of cutting out what you paid for, you don't want to cut out someone who you believe is doing great, who could, potentially win a Best Supporting Actor award or whatever. It's like, are we going to just remove this from the movie?
Well, we had that with $1 Million Arm, which I worked on. People are very scared to cut things out of movies once it gets past a certain point. And $1 Million Arm was a movie that should have been 1 hour and 40 minutes because, you want kids to go. It actually was a really good movie to take your kids to, especially kids my age. But once it gets to 2 hours, it just becomes threatening to parents because parents are, and you'll know this in 3 years. When parents take a kid to the movie, we look at the movie time, and you're processing like, all right, previews are 12 minutes, and the movie is 1 hour 30 in the car, and so that is a 2 hour 20-minute commitment. I think I can pull that off with my son. The longer you have your kids in the theater, the more chance there is like, maybe I shouldn't have given them those M&Ms or whatever's going to happen. I'm
like it already. I almost didn't go to Interstellar simply because of the runtime. That was the only thing that made me not want to see it.
Isn't it funny?
I did end up going.
But that's what's happening to baseball too, right? Like people are afraid to go to baseball games now because it's like, it's 45 minutes there. I got to park. The game might be 3.5 hours. Like, it's a 6-hour commitment potentially. Yeah, I'm going to pass. People think about runtime more than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a couple more movie questions for you.
Okay.
Why did they make Foxcatcher? Did you see Foxcatcher?
That is the movie I haven't seen yet that I want to. I have not went. I haven't.
Well, just read a magazine article for it, and you'll be good. You'll save yourself 2.5 hours.
People told me that the performances in it are great, and that it will change the way I look at Steve Carell. I got to admit, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about Steve Carell, but I can imagine him being good in a real perverse role.
He was good. It was good. He was good. Ruffalo was great. That's the best Ruffalo in a while.
So here again, it's somebody. This is Chris Ryan did this to me too. He basically went through saying everything that was good about it, and then insisted I shouldn't go. I don't get it. I mean, how can it be good but not worth seeing?
It's one of those movies that tantalizes you, and you think more is going to happen, and it's going to take you to a place you're ready to go to, and then it takes you nowhere whatsoever. It's just a matter of fact telling of what happened.
Well,
it would have been the best Lifetime movie ever.
Here's something else I heard about this movie: that it starts sad and ends sadder. Is that what you actually don't like? I feel like you like movies that are uplifting at the end.
No, not true. I like if you're going to make a movie like this where everybody already knows the story, then I need something else other than just a recounting of what the story was with really good performances. I feel like that's a game plan out of the 1980s. You know what I mean? Like why are you making a movie about this? There has to be some underlying reason other than we all know this story and hey, let's make a movie and we'll get some good actors and we'll just tell the story from point A to point Z and then the movie's over.
So you don't think Foxcatcher reflects anything about human nature or anything like that? If I go to this movie, I'm not going to be I'm not going to think about anything differently?
No.
Well, I'm probably going to see it anyways. What's your other question?
I think you'll lose a little bit of steam with Tatum, who's not that good in it. I think he's the loser coming out of this. It's weird. It's almost like he tries too hard to turn the guy into a character. It doesn't totally work. The one that I haven't seen yet that they just totally screwed up their Oscars marketing plan and now the movie is peaking, but it's peaking like you already finished voting for the Oscars. Like now it feels like the movie has momentum now, but you wanted the movie to have momentum 3 weeks ago and it didn't. Is Selma, which people at Grantland, we were talking in the meeting yesterday, and the people that work for Grantland thought it was amazing. And unfortunately, I think it's probably not going to do that well in the Oscars because it didn't get that nudge. It didn't get that nudge in time. They somehow screwed it up. I don't understand why they handled it that way.
Movies like that tend to do well in award competitions, though. You know.
But you're one of those people that you don't care about the Oscars.
No, I don't even watch.
Yeah.
I want to see the Benedict Cumberbatch movie.
That's a good one.
It's about a person who I have to admit I know nothing about. I didn't know. My wife knew all about this guy. I didn't know anything about this individual. So I'm kind of curious just learning about this person.
That's a very good movie that won't win the Oscar. What'd you think of Boyhood?
Well, okay. I don't know if we've ever talked about this before.
No, we haven't. I'm excited.
Yeah. There's no director I have more of a personal relationship with than Richard Linklater. I hate when people say things like, "Oh, punk rock saved my life," or "This song saved my life." But like when I saw Slacker, it changed my life. Like I had never thought of certain things before. Basically, the idea that you could tell a story without a narrative that had never ever occurred to me before. I was pretty young when I saw it. I watched it twice, back to back. Like we watched it on. It was me and my roommate at the time, a guy named Rex. We watched the movie, and then we just rewound it and watched it again. So his career, I've always felt like everything he's done has been sort of meaningful to me, even the ones that weren't that good. So when this movie, I think that it may win the Oscar for Best Picture, and if it does, from a technical standpoint, it'll probably be one of the weaker movies to have ever won Best Picture. However, the pure accomplishment of this movie, there's no movie like it. There is no fictional version of a film like this. There are documentaries like this, like the 7 Up series, and even like Hoop Dreams, you see these people change over time. There is no other film like this. This is a completely unique thing. And I think because of that, I think it deserves whatever award it gets. Because you can't, it's not like somebody can watch that film and go like, I'm going to do this, without saying, I'm going to invest 12 or 14 years of my life. So, when you watch that film, I'm always sort of amazed by anybody who doesn't think it's kind of good, just because it's such there's no other experience like it. I mean, like, of course it feels emotional. Like, how can it not feel emotional to literally watch someone grow up in front of you?
So I'm torn on it because I saw this movie on an airplane, which is the worst place to see any good movie. And I really regret that's how I saw the movie. I agree with you. I thought it was an accomplishment, and it's the first of its kind. And any movie that rips it off, Boyhood did it first.
You can't rip it off.
Well, just the concept of over 12 years. I'm a sucker for movies where characters age over time. I've just always liked those movies. I've always. I think the accomplishment of the movie and how cool it was to watch the characters age, especially Patricia Arquette, who, you really felt like she aged, and there was some personal stuff in there with how she aged with the character that I thought was cool. And I thought Ethan Hawke, that was the best he's ever been in a movie. I didn't think the kid was that good. And I think the kid's gotten a free pass because he aged during the movie, and had he known, and you're not casting, but he's in so much of the movie, and he's just not that good. And the only reason he's good is that you're watching him thinking, this is cool. I watched this kid grow up. But just as an actor, he's not that good. And the scenes with him were a little amateur, I felt like.
I guess I would kind of disagree with you. I thought he was pretty good, but I mean, that's just a subjective thing. Interestingly, I was on the phone the other day with my buddy from college who he's a pharmacist in Bemidji, Minnesota now, and he saw Boyhood recently, not knowing that it had been filmed over all these years. All he knew it was a Richard Linklater film.
Yeah.
So hearing his description of watching that movie is kind of amazing, because I wonder how many people watch that movie not knowing sort of the conceit. I mean, like what he said initially, he was like, "Boy, that kid looks a lot like the other kid. They did a great job casting." Initially, I think he thought the movie was actually moving kind of slow, like not much is happening.
Yeah.
And then when it sort of dawned on him that this is what had happened, they'd actually done this over time, then everything just immediately shifted. To me, it would be like if somebody wrote a book where they wrote one paragraph a day, every day for 30 years. The quality of the writing would sort of be usurped by the idea that they actually did this, and that this is something that, like, it doesn't matter what technology you use. It doesn't matter how much money you spend. Like you can't buy time. And when there's an investment of time, it is greater than any other investment possible. So I don't know. I'll be happy if it sort of is over rewarded, despite the fact that there are problems with the film itself. The other thing that I liked about the film, which other people have noted, is that it does something like really cool, which is constantly create situations where our history with movies tells us something bad is going to happen. This kid's going to get hurt now, or this, and it never does. And that's actually how life is. If you look back over your life, you constantly can see situations where, like, boy, in retrospect, it was incredibly stupid that I did that. That was really dangerous. I mean, I remember in high school we would ride on top of our cars, like hold on to and drive real fast on these gravel roads. And I can't believe we did it now. Someone could have died or easily been paralyzed, but it didn't seem like anything at the time. It wasn't even like a memorable thing we were doing. It was just like, once again, we drove around on top of our cars.
Well, Linklater, this is obviously a theme he really cares about because this was basically the Before Sunrise trilogy. That was effectively the same idea, although it wasn't intended to be that way. But those are 3 movies about the same couple spread across 20 years, and they're different. The first one's about just when people, that point in your life when you're early 20s and you just believe in true love. And then the second one's about, so maybe I was wrong about true love, maybe I'm not as idealistic as I used to be. And then the third one is, I'm stuck with this person and I'm kind of here. And those are the 3 themes. And that is really interesting as a collection. I didn't like the ending of the third one. I thought it betrayed the whole series. But as those 3 movies, as those 3 themes are interesting.
I thought the third one was pretty great. The thing that Richard Linklater loves just is the idea of time. Okay, like Slacker, one day, basically 1 day and 1 night. Dazed and Confused, it's almost like classical unity. It's like it all happens in the same span of time. In Waking Life, there's a period where actually it's Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke are in bed together. This is the animated movie. And they're talking about the idea of dream time, how you can look at your clock at 7:05 in the morning and you fall back asleep and you have this vivid dream that goes on for, weeks and weeks in your mind. And then you wake up and it's like 7:14. You've actually only been sleeping 8 minutes, but in your mind you had this expanse of time. And wouldn't it be interesting if that is how the experience of death is like? That when people say their life flashes in front of their eyes, it's because maybe in the moment of your death, you were able to relive the entire 80-some years that you were on Earth, which is like a very positive way to think about it.
And don't forget Dazed and Confused, last day of high school in the 70s.
Didn't I mention that? Did I skip over that one?
Oh, maybe you did. My dog just pushed open the door and wandered in and was staring at me as you were doing your whole monologue. So I think he's a Linklater fan too. Last thing, and then we have to go. And this really isn't important at all, but I just think I'd be interested to see what your take is. I don't know if you follow the Leo DiCaprio just going out and getting it done with women kind of era of the paparazzi / blogs, whatever. There's always these photos of, there was one recently of Leo in St. Bart's with 4 women. He's kind of just, he's now in his 40s and he's still kind of living the same life that he led 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was with my friend Ben watching football this weekend, and we were talking about Leo and just how he's set up the rest of his life somehow, and he's still the same guy who's out all the time. And we were saying, like, has there ever been somebody in the history of America, other than maybe JFK Jr., is the only other person I can think of, who, no matter how old he is, it's like more generations of women who are in there maybe from the 20 to 26 range. It's just this never-ending crop of women who are in love with him. And it's because of Titanic. And you think about Titanic comes out in 97. So anyone who's from the age of like 18 to 30 from that movie, they're in love with Leo and he can have anyone he wants. So now it hits cable, it hits VHS. Now we're in like the 2004, 2005 range. Now you have all the 10, 11, and 12 and 13-year-old girls who went to see Titanic 7 times. Now they're all in their early 20s, and they're all like, the highlight of my life would be making out with Leo DiCaprio. So now he's got this third generation of women, now that we're in the mid-2010s, women who were like basically either babies or 2 or 3 when Titanic came out. And then when they were like 8 or 9, it was the first movie they ever saw, or the first movie they started watching over and over again on VHS. And now they're all 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and they can't believe that they're hanging out with Leo DiCaprio. This guy somehow has 3 generations of women. And it's unprecedented, Chuck.
Well, it is if you do you think it's directly tied to Titanic?
Yes, I think it's 100% tied. Well, I think he also, obviously he's a handsome guy. He's a great actor. He's great at what he does. He's in good movies. He's relevant. He's rich. He's somebody that he has, the fear of commitment. He's dated a lot of supermodels. So if you're with him, that means you've vetted some imaginary, you've gotten past some imaginary velvet rope of life. You were good enough to be with Leo DiCaprio. Like, he's got all that stuff too. But fundamentally, it's Titanic. He was in Titanic.
Like Jack Nicholson has sort of been able to live the same life he lived in 1973.
Yes, for just decades. Yeah.
Although that has less to do with any individual or specific role he did, and sort of the character he seems to play in life.
That's a charisma play. Leo has the charisma plus the looks, plus the stature, plus the Titanic. It's almost, I would say it's him and JFK Jr. in the finals versus in the fictional competition of just who could get the most women they wanted.
I'm offering a possible candidate, despite the fact that I have no evidence that this is true.
Okay.
Like, I don't know anything about this guy's personal life. But if you say that DiCaprio's whole sort of sexual career is built around his appearance in this one film, the only person I can think who might have had the same sort of experience is Clark Gable. Oh. Because Gone with the Wind was like the Titanic of its time.
That's great.
And it was often the first adult movie anybody saw. And though he was in, numerous roles, that role sort of defines him and defines a certain kind of attractiveness for dudes. I don't know. Although I have no idea. He was married to Carol Lombard, I think. That's the only thing I know about his life. Maybe he was married to her for 50 years for all I know. I have no idea. But I would be curious. Well, what if that movie sort of followed him all the way through? But you're right.
I would say I would, and I would say Casa. I don't know enough about Casablanca, but maybe that happened with Bogart too, because that's a movie that every girl watched at some point.
I felt that it happened. I wrote about this, that John Cusack for a long time was sort of an idealized person for a lot of women, simply because of the character he was to say anything.
Didn't have the looks, and also that didn't have the generational. Well, when and you're not 8 years old, you watch this movie.
He turned against it. He seemed to actively. I think that he felt that people were viewing him as if he was like that Dobler character. He was Lloyd Dobler all the time, and so he went out of his way basically to almost annihilate that person. So it would be really strange. I think if he met some woman now and she was like, I loved Lloyd Dobler, he would walk away from her.
Right. He's had a weird relationship both with that movie, and he's just had a weird career. He seems like kind of a tortured guy and
angry guy.
Piven's his best friend, and Piven's like this legendary Hollywood and
also his big buddy is Mark Lehner, the writer Mark Lehner, who I'm sure you must have probably read in the 90s. It was like that's a weird person to be friends with in some ways.
But they made Hot Tub Time Machine, and he totally mailed in his performance. It was clear like he was mad at his agent the whole time, and then it was like a smash hit. And you watch and and the whole time you're thinking like, why isn't Cusack more into this? He just seems miserable the whole time. It was like watching Kevin Love on the Cavs right now. He's just like, get me out of here. Get me out of this movie. But I think Leo's basically the perfect package anyway for somebody that is going to be able to kind of date whoever he wants. But then the Titanic thing is some sort of amazing trump card. So people listening out there, if you have any other...
He doesn't make throwaway movies. That's a big part of it. If he's in a movie, it's almost like just the fact that he's in it somehow suggests that it's kind of meaningful. It doesn't matter how good it is. It's just like his involvement is all that matters. You know?
Yeah, and history says that at some point that's going to flip, and all of a sudden he'll be in, whatever his version of the Equalizer is. Those a lot of Denzel choices.
Because it would be one thing if he was only handsome. Like, he is a pretty good actor. And there are certain roles that if it's built for him, that he can sort of elevate it. I think he'll probably continue making maybe 1.5 movies a year, and he will be famous late into his life. And I don't mean like everyone is famous to a degree late in their life when they come back, but he will continually be famous. He will be the example people use when they make entourage type shows. It's like, this is kind of like he's the DiCaprio character. Like, he will be the default example of a really famous man.
I'm also always amazed by how tight his circle of friends is. And, they were kind of like this little gang out here. And nobody's ever spilled secrets. It's almost like he kind of figured out early on, I'm going to trust these 7 people. These are my people. And that's it. And we're just going to roll.
Well, I got to say that the circle of people who I bet is a pretty high, you're highly motivated to keep those secrets.
Yeah.
You would not want to be cast out of that circle. I feel like you would lose out a lot if you did.
Believe me, that's how Joe House feels in my circle. Yeah, think of all the eating he'd lose out on.
Well, that's true. He doesn't spill any of your secrets. He's never, I'm sure one of the kind of the many lesser sports websites would love to do a tell-all with Joe House, breaking down the reality behind the curtain, like the dark secrets of your life. But he refuses to. Like, J-Bug is never pulled into the fray. No. None of these people, I, of course, would be totally open to that, though. Anybody wants to do a takedown on you, come to me.
This is a good way to end it. What was the movie you didn't see?
I haven't seen Foxcatcher.
Okay. That's it, though? That's the only one you haven't seen?
Oh, I haven't seen the Cumberbatch movie. There's a bunch I haven't seen. Because, it's hard to see movies now. If I see them, I got to go during the day, but without my wife, or we have to go separately because we'll get a babysitter. It takes a lot to get a babysitter to see a movie. Like, you really got to think it's going to be good. That's
why I really wanted the interview to work for the whole pay-per-view model.
Oh, I did see that. I did see that. I saw that last Friday.
But they priced it wrong, and they made it so that people came out of the whole interview thing and thought to themselves, maybe this doesn't totally work. Like, and it wasn't the right movie either. It wasn't a good movie. I still think that model is going to work. I really do. I think that's where things headed, and they just have to price it.
The model of threatening to kill a world leader in order to prop up the.
Not the script model. The script model was a mistake.
That's what we should talk about. Do you believe that it was North Korea who did those acts?
Well, how much I love conspiracy theories. There's some great ones going on around this now.
Yeah, well, there's just not a lot of evidence that North Korea did this besides our government saying it was. And
let's put it this way: I wouldn't bet against a very disgruntled Sony employee.
Well, because if you're the U.S. government and hello,
yeah,
okay, if you're the U.S. government and this actually happens, if North Korea actually does this, I think your response would be to deny that they succeeded. I think you only say they did it if they didn't, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like, what if it's an unknown terrorist threat? It would seem odd to support the idea that they did it if they have not really taken responsibility. I'm very skeptical.
I also thought it was one of Obama's strangest moments of his whole presidency. This is a guy who tiptoed around Ferguson, basically didn't go out on a limb at all, which I thought was really disappointing, and
I'm always fascinated by what Obama does comment on. He's like, the Lions had a terrible call against him. It's like I did not anticipate seeing Obama's take on the Lions-Cowboys game. That was very surprising to me.
Obama handles his presidency with like kind of in the moment American things the same way like your buddy would who just texts you about stuff. He'd be like, hey, if I text you like, hey, what do you think of this Sony thing? And Obama's like, I think they should have released the movie. Can't kowtow to these guys. It's like, wait, you're the president. You can't say that, you dumb. First of all, it was like he didn't have any of the information. Like Sony got annihilated. I'm not defending, that they pulled the movie, but first of all, 80% of the theaters had already said they weren't going to show it. Sony had no payroll system. They had no computer system. They had no email system. Their entire company was under attack. Their chairman was getting attacked. And they just kind of panicked, and they're like, well, let's not release this movie right now while we're going through this stuff. And then Obama comes out and takes a shot at him. I thought that was crazy.
Well, and particularly from the theater's perspective, they don't make money on people seeing the film anyways. They don't care. They make it on concessions and all these things. So it's like, put Annie on another screen. We don't care. And I'm sure the mall there, and Wesley Morris was telling me about this. Basically, it's like Forever 21 in the mall is like, hey, if you put this movie in theaters and you decrease the amount of shopping traffic the day after Christmas by 2%, we are all in the hurt bag. Just show Annie again. And that so, I mean, but this is all, people are so, I feel confused about anything that they feel is a free speech issue. Because they, it's just, I mean, legally, America has the best free speech laws. That the government will never, will stop anybody from publishing it. But what has happened as almost all, communication now is so tied into it, to the kind of the monetized capitalist side, that people will say like, well, we defend your right to say this, but we will not pay for it. And in fact, we will go on the internet and try to end your career. Well, that is the same chilling effect as the government stepping in. So when you look at a country in Scandinavia where they actually do have laws, against hate speech or whatever, and you think, well, boy, they're not as free, except that when someone offers a real dangerous idea that doesn't fall under the rubric of hate speech, that idea is actually accepted by the people and considered. That would never happen here. Here, we police ourselves into basically stopping ideas from happening if they bother us in any way.
Yeah. It's turning into a country that we support free speech as long as it's the speech we agree with.
Well, it's like we support free speech, but we'll do everything else around it. We'll allow you to say it and then destroy your career. So you have to self-censor yourself to not say anything that's uncomfortable. I mean, we could have went into this whole stuff in France. I mean, it's a real complicated deal. And yet the reaction to it in the United States, I have just found maddening. And I just, oh well.
Yeah, I don't think social media helps this stuff, because social media can push the nuts and bolts and the 140 characters of whatever the issue is, and it's like this snowball that rolls down a hill, and it's not always the right snowball. It's not even just social media. It's the fact that there used to be a time when people said they didn't like something. Now they say they are offended by it. And when you say you're offended by it, you're basically saying to other like-minded people, if you have the same values as me and you're not offended by this, your taste is in question. In fact, it goes beyond taste. You need to be upset about this. And it can generate this idea that it's not just that, I don't mind if someone is personally offended by something, but why does someone's personal offense have to be collectively offensive? Why do they have to convince themselves that because they are offended, they need to protect other people who might be like them, or to remind them that they should be upset about this? I mean, this conversation could go on for 7 hours, but unfortunately, we're out of time.
Yeah, this is supposed to be 20 minutes.
I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, but we'll save them for another era. But I do think 2014, the two things that stood out for me are just the snowball of the way that things can get rolling one way or the other. That was one thing. The other thing is just encryption and hacking, and where is this stuff going? What's safe? Wait, do I have to delete every email I've ever sent? Do I have to voraciously guard every photo I've ever taken? Like, where does this end? And I think that's not an issue just for a private person, but an issue for somebody who runs a movie studio or runs Apple or runs whoever. Everyone is thinking about that same issue now.
It is absolutely not unthinkable to imagine a Gmail hack where every single Gmail that was ever been written is suddenly on an open database.
Yeah.
Boy, will we see people's reactions then. We'll see a lot of people who said one thing say something very differently when that occurs. It's almost inevitable.
Yeah. I mean, you think like the what they call the fappening, that hack or all the nude photos on the iCloud and all that stuff. Like, that was insane. And that was actually undercovered because everybody was afraid to talk about it. But I mean, man, you have these photos in your iCloud that you took with your boyfriend. All of a sudden they're on the internet. So I think.
Do you feel safer having stayed on?
So did they put the fear of God in me. I think I have like one email to Joe House about whether he thinks the Wizards can make the NBA Finals. That's probably the only email you'll be able to have.
Yeah, but when you erase the emails on Gmail, though, then it doesn't remember. Like when you start typing an address in, and I really need that because I don't have a contact book or anything. I just trust my ability to half remember people's email and then expect Gmail to complete it for me.
Chuck Klosterman, always a pleasure. Congrats on your first successful college football playoff. I was really proud of you. I thought you were vindicated in a lot of different ways, and we will talk to you soon.
You bet, man.
Target percent off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.
Hey, what you got there, Goldick?
The new Subway Chipotle chicken melt with guacamole.
Man, that looks good.
Yeah, this new guac is really bringing the flavor.
Got one for me too, right?
Well, yes and no. Mostly no. Well, really, all no.
Try the irresistible new Subway Chipotle chicken melt with guacamole, juicy grilled chicken strips with Monterey cheddar, Chipotle Southwest sauce, and new guacamole made from ripe Hass avocados with just a hint of jalapeno. Subway, eat fresh.